ready when we are, so we will get going. Okay. And hello, everyone out there on Facebook and YouTube. Thanks for joining us tonight. I'm Justin Hicks. I'm Indiana Public Broadcasting's workforce development reporter. And tonight we're going to talk through the latest on unemployment here in Indiana. So at IPBS, we've been receiving a lot of questions for information on the newest federal unemployment benefits program called Lost Wage Assistance, or LWA. And we're also going to talk about how Indiana plans to make them available to Hoosiers. So the plan tonight is to give you a quick update, answer a few of those questions you've sent us over the past few weeks. Then we're going to dive into some recent data trends and then talk to some guests who are watching unemployment really closely, even hear from a job training and reemployment program that's doing their part to fix some of this. So without further ado, let's just sort of jump in with a quick summary of where we are right now. So the extra $600 benefits underneath the CARES Act expired in July 25th here in Indiana. So the Lost Wage Assistance Program benefits, they came from the White House, and they stepped in to sort of try to fill that gap there. Only people who are eligible for $100 or more of unemployment benefits each week under any of the programs, that's PUA, that's regular unemployment insurance. If you're eligible for unemployment insurance, no matter what the program is, if you are making $100 more under that, you are eligible for that extra $300 benefit called LWA. So in Indiana, that applies for July 26th, the week of July 26th, through the week ending July 15th. And the reason for that is because that was when it basically goes right back to the very date when the $600 cut off in Indiana. So the $600 cut off on July 25th in Indiana because of the way that our unemployment kind of calendar comes into play. So starting July 26th, through August 15th. So it's still going to take a couple weeks for the state to finalize the software. They've said that it's going to take them, this was a week or two ago, I think they said 2 to 4 weeks. So I would give it another 1 to 3 weeks or so before the state can kind of catch up and recode the software to make those payments. So it's not going to be, right away, but it should be coming. And a lot of people have asked us as well about the rationale behind having people receive at least $100 to qualify for the extra money. So, of course, you'll see lots of news articles coming up right now, including from us, about how some of the people who are the lowest income are actually not even eligible for this LWA program. So a lot of you have asked about sort of what's the rationale here. And this is really the best answer that I can give you from the research that I've done and the people that I've talked to at DWD. So the short answer to this is essentially that when the White House made this executive order, it was literally written into the executive order that you have to make at least $100 on unemployment to qualify. And there's not really any way that states have to get around that. So that's kind of written right there into federal law. Now, the longer answer to this, if you want to get to the nuts and bolts, there is an act in the federal government called the Stafford Relief Act, and that dictates how FEMA, which is where this money is coming from, the LWA money, it dictates how FEMA can actually spend that money. And across the board, when FEMA spends money, this Stafford Act says that the federal government contributes 75% of those relief funds, and the state has to contribute the other 25%. And to my understanding, that's pretty much true, whether it's, disaster relief funds for a hurricane or any type of recession. So the way that worked out was when that executive order was written, they kind of thought that it would be $400. So the federal government thought, okay, well, if we do $300, that means the state can do $100. And that's the way it was written. But a lot of states then actually went backwards and thought to themselves, well, hang on a second. We don't have an extra $100 laying around to give to people on top of that $300. So many of the states actually reinterpreted this law, and the Department of Labor kind of helped the states reinterpret this law to mean that as long as somebody was getting $100 from the state in any form of unemployment insurance, that would satisfy the requirement for the state to contribute $100, and therefore the federal government could then give the $300. So that's kind of nuts and bolts, maybe a little too technical, but that is sort of the explanation for that rationale. And I think bottom line here for you, if you're watching here in Indiana, is that essentially that was a federal decision. The state had really nothing to do with that, and they have to follow these rules that come down from the federal government to use this money. So one thing I wanted to play for you really quickly is just a little clip from an interview I recently had with Josh Richardson at DWD. He is the chief of staff over there, and he told me a little bit more about how Indiana specifically came to this decision to not offer the additional $100 in order to make that grand benefit total of $400. So let's take a listen here, and maybe this helps explain it a little bit more too.
I mean, we didn't need congressional authorization, as far as I can tell, to use state funds to pay people extra. So the $100 sort of just became arbitrary, right? Once they decided that the 25% match worked. Now, one, you're talking about, that was probably somewhere between $400 and $700 million that the state would have had to come up with through December. Now, not through the 4 or 5 weeks that are funded, but so it came with this gigantic price tag for which there was no funding source. I think also, but I think belief that the unemployment rate itself is continuing to move. I think there's also, I would reference just slightly the fact that there were some studies that indicated early on that, as many as 2/3 of the people on benefits were receiving more than they did while working. And I think that there was some interest in trying to figure out what does $300 in Indiana look like, and where does it get us in terms of the replacement of people's wages, and the fact that there will still be a substantial number of people that are at or above 100% wage replacement. I think all of those things all sort of factor together to say, look, the 300 is a good number. It's one that we know has the funding for it, and there's no reason for us to wait to make a decision on this program when the feds are allowing us to make the $300 payments on their dime.
Okay, and so then just a final little update to give you as far as this goes is there's also been some talk in some media outlets, including stuff that I think Indy Star reported on this last week. We reported on this before as well. There's been some talk and some worry about Indiana actually running out of potentially money to pay for unemployment benefits. And so one thing I want to say, kind of first of all, with big bold sign here, is that if you are receiving unemployment benefits, you don't have to worry about Indiana running out of money for unemployment benefits. Legally, they have to pay you unemployment benefits. There's no way around that. Where this sort of story is coming from, though, is that Indiana does have an unemployment insurance trust fund, and that's what they use to pay these regular state unemployment benefits. That fund is getting kind of low, and one thing that we do want to kind of send you home with tonight a little bit is to show you that you can actually check the account balance yourself of Indiana's unemployment trust fund. You can go on Treasury Direct, Treasury as in the U.S. Department of Treasury, direct.gov, and search there for unemployment insurance trust funds. You can look at Indiana and go to account statement, and it literally shows you as soon as of yesterday, it'll show you exactly what the account balance is that Indiana has. So hopefully we can get that up on the screen for you. And as you can see, Indiana has about $83 million left as of yesterday to pay for the state unemployment funds. And again, don't worry. Indiana will probably, in fact, sometime either at the end of this month or early next month, they basically already said that they're going to have to apply for a loan from the federal government, and they're going to refill that trust fund money. So no worries there. The only thing that could change potentially would be the amount that your employer would have to pay into the trust fund next year in order to refill that trust fund. It's a long story, but there's percentages, and as that fund gets lower, employers pay a little bit more into the fund. And then when the fund is really nice and you've got over $1 billion in there, then they say, you know what, we're pretty good on money. You can probably pay a little bit less. So it might change things for employers, but it should not change anything for you if you're unemployed. So it's food for thought, but something that shouldn't worry you at all. So those are really kind of just the big updates that we have for you that's happened in the past few weeks. But I'm sure if you're out there watching, you probably have more questions. So I encourage you to leave those questions on the Facebook Live sidebar there where you can type in a question, or if you're on YouTube, maybe type in a comment on there, and we will get to those questions and get them to our panelist here that I would love to introduce. So our three guests that we have tonight. Number one is going to be Rachel Blakeman. Rachel is with the Community Research Institute at Purdue University, Fort Wayne. So do you want to say hi real quick, Rachel? You're muted. Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, no, sorry, I hit the wrong button. Yes, no, thank you for having me. I'm looking forward to being able to talk a little bit about what we're seeing on trends with unemployment numbers. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thanks for being here. Number 2, we have Yesenia Tostado with Project Azul. And Yesenia, do you want to say a quick hello?
Yeah, hi everyone. I'm happy to be here with you all this evening.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Yesenia. And then finally, we have Mary McCloskey with us. Mary is an administrator of a Facebook group that's been helping folks around the state. And Mary, you want to say a quick hello, and then maybe I can ask you a couple questions about what you're seeing from folks in this unemployment group.
Yeah. Hi, everybody. It's good to be here. Hopefully we can help get some stuff answered for everybody. So.
Absolutely. Yeah. So, I mean, just to start off a little bit, Mary, I would love for you to kind of tell really briefly the story of this Facebook group in the first place for maybe people who don't know about it. I mean, it blew up, right?
Yeah. Well, it started because I was off of work and I like to read laws and I pay attention to the news a lot. And I really just wanted to help people I knew, like coworkers and friends. And once I started it, I mean, it went from 100 people to 500 people, and now we're at 7,200 people. So that's really how it happened. So
that's amazing. And what kinds of stuff?
It's crazy.
What kinds of stuff do you guys do in this group? How do you help each other? How does that work?
Well, our administrators, we have 10 administrators, and we do a lot of brainstorming together or like researching the laws so we can give people accurate information. So when people come up with problems and they can't get answers or get through to the call center, we can actually look up the laws and reference the law to give them the correct information. So that's and we also try to keep up on the news, like with the executive order, we were watching that every minute, and as soon as it got published, we had it on there. So yeah.
And to be clear, like this is none of your jobs. I mean, I'm assuming no one here has like legal backgrounds. This is like truly community driven kind of, right?
Yeah, it's totally community driven. Yes, everybody is volunteering. All the research they do is voluntarily. We do have some people that can't do as much anymore because they're back to work, but they still, come in and help. So, I mean, yeah, it's completely voluntary. So, and we have a really good group of administrators, a really good one. So,
yeah, that's great to see. It's great to see. So, I'm kind of curious. I know we've talked about this a little bit, but I'd love for you to kind of share with everyone what are some of the issues that we're sort of seeing currently, right now, today, the past few days. What's first and foremost in everyone's mind right now?
Well, Sunday, after everybody filed their vouchers, a lot of people got eligibility issues, and many people were disqualified for fear of COVID was the reason that popped up on the determination notice. A lot of these people, fear of COVID doesn't fit the situation that they're in. So we're trying to figure out why they got these issues and why they've been disqualified. Many of them are being told that they're disqualified all the way back to March, and so they have huge overpayment amounts. So that's kind of where we're at right now. We've tried to reach out to DWD to try to get some answers on this. We're not sure if people should be appealing the decision or if they shouldn't be appealing the decision. Some people have been told yes. Some people have been told no. So we really just need to try to find out what they're supposed to be doing. I can't give good advice if I don't know what they're doing, what they're supposed to be doing. So
that's amazing. I mean, and to be clear about that too, I mean, so basically people are having problems where not only are they being told they're not eligible for future benefits, they're being told all the way back to March, you may have gotten $10,000 in benefits, and now the state is saying, we want that $10,000 back.
Yes, that's exactly what's happening. Yes.
That's
and some of them
terrifying.
are actually, and actually some of them are back to work and they're still getting disqualified for fear of COVID. So if you went back to work, how can you be disqualified for fear of COVID? So we're trying to get a handle on that. So.
And to be clear, that means back to work, but less hours than usual, right?
Yes, they're filing partial unemployment. Yes.
Right.
So, yeah.
Wow. So that's sort of the next hurdle to get over, it seems. I'm kind of curious about this. I know DWD has told me in the past, and they've been pretty open about this. They've said that roughly 85% of people get paid within 21 days, or usually less when they apply for benefits. So I'm kind of curious, are you still hearing of people who have these backlogs, who are still waiting weeks, sometimes months, for their benefits at all?
Yes. Yes, we have. There's hundreds of people in there that have been waiting since April. They can't get any answers. I don't think 85% of my group is getting paid. I guess that's what you would say. There's people that have been there since day one with me that I still see. I have a gentleman that the first day I started the group, he joined. That was April 6th, and he still has not been paid. So that's yeah.
That's amazing. I mean, and maybe a little bit of an obvious question here, but I mean, how are people feeling? Like, what are you seeing? Just how does this affect people?
People are. I've seen a lot of depressing posts. We've had a few people threaten suicide over this, or thinking that's what their only alternative. We've seen people lose their house, their cars. They're scared because all of the eviction orders have been lifted. The utility disconnects are going to be lifted, or they've already been lifted. But a lot of the utility companies are going to start in the middle of September. But yeah, I mean, people are losing their lives, because they can't get paid their unemployment, and so it's really sad. It's really sad, but at the same time, I mean, everybody tries to support each other, so that is one of the brighter sides, is that when that stuff happens, the group comes in and they all try to help support, or give encouraging words. So that is a bright side of it, but it just, if you don't have that, or you don't know how to reach out, what could happen, it's really scary. That's really scary to all of us when that happens. So
yeah, and I know one thing that I've noticed in reporting on this, and maybe you've seen this as well, is I kept hearing over and over from people when I was interviewing them. They were saying, basically, I'm not upset or mad at individual people here. I'm just really frustrated with the system. I think an example that I kept hearing from people was, it's sort of like, it's like when you call your cable company and you're trying to get something changed, you think they can just pull up your account and just, fix it right then and there, and they say, all right, you're all good. And this is not that, right? I mean, no. Would you say that, is it just sort of this general sort of, I don't know, maybe just sort of a general sense of just annoyance, or maybe annoyance isn't the right word, but just kind of being fed up with the system a little bit?
Yes, I'm definitely seeing a lot of that. I think a lot of people, this is their first time ever having to deal with the unemployment system, or having to deal with any type of assistance program. So this is really showing a lot of the downfalls of the system in general, and especially when you have this many people. I mean, it already didn't work that great, and now you have this many people trying to get it, and that's what's backlogging everything. So that.
Right. Well, thank you so much for kind of that update here, and I'm sure we'll circle back here in a minute I'm sure we'll get some questions here. So we'll move on really quickly here to Rachel. Rachel, I know you work for the Community Research Institute. Can you tell us a little bit about that? Because when you go on the Community Research Institute website, you guys look at everything from warning sirens to food manufacturing. So how does unemployment fit into what you study?
Yeah, so the Community Research Institute has had historically a focus on workforce development and economic development. So I've inherited that from previous directors. We've done some other things, as you noted, but this has been one that we've been taking a look at. And so I follow every month as I watch the numbers come out from the Department of Workforce Development, and then offer an opportunity for local media to get some perspective that helps them put it into context. So the familiarity that we have, obviously, we're in Fort Wayne, so we're very familiar with the Northeast Indiana market, less so in the rest of the state, but not to the point where we don't know what else is happening.
Yeah, absolutely. And I have to say, as someone who lives in South Bend as well, and we talk pretty often, I know that a lot of what's going on in the Fort Wayne area with manufacturing also seems to echo here in Elkhart and South Bend as well. So very similar issues all across the state. So, I mean, given that, I'm curious, what what kind of trend are you seeing, for the most recent numbers? And what should we take away from that?
Sure. Well, so I did some research looking at updated numbers and recapping what's going on. So if we look at it, the peak unemployment claims in terms of continued unemployment claims week over week was the week ending May 2nd. So it was right before the reopening orders started. So right at the end of the shutdown, we were at about 272,000 claims. For our point of reference, the high point of the Great Recession was the beginning of January 2010 at 279,500. So we did not cross over a new threshold in terms of total. The most recent data available, which was earlier this month, we have about 126,435 continued unemployment claims across the state. Now, remember, this doesn't mean that this is the same as being unemployed, because there were going to be people who will no longer qualify for unemployment claims because they've been offered the opportunity to go back to work and they have declined that. So if you're somebody who's at risk of COVID and you believe your job is a high risk situation and you opted not to go back to work, you're not going to be counted in that. Then I wanted to take a look and see where we're at in terms of industry profiles of the claimants. And we're actually pretty evenly split right now across the state between manufacturing and accommodations and food service. So it's either hotels and restaurants or manufacturing. It's a really interesting mix across like Northwest Indiana. Restaurants and hotels are number one. Manufacturing is number one for South Bend and Fort Wayne. Then when we get down to the southern part of the state, in terms of the Louisville area and Evansville, manufacturing and accommodations are almost evenly split. So it's a really interesting thing as we look across the state, what we're seeing on that. So manufacturing still is being hit hard. I think that was the one that, as we were following this, hit people by surprise. I mean, so we were hearing about obviously restaurants that were being, dining rooms were being closed, but also remember that manufacturing produces the goods that people buy, and suddenly people weren't buying things, either out of financial necessity or they're just not leaving their house, and so they don't need it. So we saw that across the state.
Yeah, and I think too, especially as Indiana's economy is so manufacturing dependent. I mean, that is by far our largest sector of employment there. When manufacturing goes down, all of Indiana seems to hurt there.
Actually, it may not be the largest at this point. It's largest in GDP. Healthcare, at least in Northeast Indiana, is larger, and I wouldn't be surprised if it's happened. But healthcare tends to be recirculation of local dollars. Manufacturing brings in new dollars. So when I think about the auto plants that we have across the state, those are building automobiles across the country, whereas your hospital is taking care of your local residents. So it's a little bit different, but it's not a huge difference.
Gotcha. Okay, that's great. And the GDP measure, right? Okay, absolutely. And you talk about continued claims. I know when I've talked to DWD over the past few weeks, they've constantly told me that is really the big metric that they're looking at, is the continued claims numbers, for them to kind of get a sense of where we are with unemployment. I mean, would you agree with that? That is probably maybe one of the best metrics we have right now to look at.
Well, it's one of the unique measures because you get it in almost near real-time functions. So when we think about it, we just got last week the July unemployment numbers. So there's a long lag time. This you get nearly in real time. So the DWD website has some great visualizations for people who are interested in either following the state, their particular county. They can look at regions. It's really up to them. And you can see that the trend line, obviously, it went up during the shutdown and then has been coming down, but it's kind of flatlining. And so as of the week ending August 22nd, there were more than 11,000 initial unemployment claims. So obviously some of that's going to be people who were laid off like a week or maybe a month ago, but there's still people who are being laid off. And so we don't want to forget that we're still in a recession. So there's a story going on here.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know that I think, I myself, I think I heard of 800 or something employees laid off of US Steel, just over there in Gary just the other day as well. I mean, it was a week or two ago, maybe. So absolutely, there's still big layoffs happening. I wonder as well, statistically, do you know much about how BLS, there's been talk about the unemployment rate, the percentage, maybe being a little bit wonky right now with the Bureau of Labor Statistics and the way that they've been reporting that data. Do you have a little bit of insight into how much we should trust that percentage?
Well, so the data that we use is from the Department of Workforce Development. And so they look at it with a confluence of factors. So there's interviews that actually happen. So they pick up the phone and talk to people, but then they're also looking at those continued unemployment claims, initial unemployment claims. So it's a confluence of factors. They're making a good guess. It's not a census, so we don't know exactly. That's what's nice about these initial and continued unemployment claims, because either you got it or you didn't. The other ones, they're making some good guesses. It's the best data we have, and it's the most recent data we have. So we would want to look at that.
Oh, absolutely. And then on the flip side of this as well, do we have a good way to gauge, or is unemployment maybe the best way to look at, are people returning to jobs? Like, is there a metric we should be looking at sort of for that?
Well, so remember, the unemployment tells us just one part of the story. So really there's multiple. So what makes up our unemployment rate is the percentage of people who are looking for work but have not found it, as compared to those who are working. So I'll explain this here, that you can start with the number of people who are working, then the number of people who are actively looking for work. So that means that and actively looking means you are applying, you are interviewing. It does not mean that you went online, checked out a couple things, didn't see anything you liked, and carried on with your day. So you have that. So I think what was really interesting that I saw for the numbers for the July unemployment claims, July unemployment rates, look like you could easily tout it if look at it's dropped. What we noticed, though, in every single county, the labor force dropped. That tells me that people are leaving work. And this is not a time where we would expect to see that from seasonal fluctuations. This is not the end of summer employment for people, for students returning to work or those who just work in the summers. So when we looked at it, I just pulled some numbers here. I was looking at it. I did some analysis. You had a 5.3% drop in the number of people in the labor force in Howard County and LaPorte County from June to July. So it's a pretty significant drop on some of these. And so that tells me that people have just left the workforce. Now, what we know from the Great Recession is that these were often lower skilled workers who may be sitting on the sidelines. There may be some other factors in this event here, thinking about people who might be deciding to retire early, who might have said, you know what, I'm 64, I'll be hitting Medicare in a few months, let me just leave the workforce. It may also be working mothers who have opted out of the workforce, recognizing that children were going to be in online school, depending on when you had that. So there's lots of things. What we'll want to see is if these people re-engage with the workforce as the economy picks up again. We don't know that because we simply don't know what the trajectory is. I mean, so everybody's thinking are we on nobody knows what the trend line is going to look like. Are we flattening out? Are we going to start going back up, or are we preparing for a double dip? No one has any idea. And anybody who claims to either has a crystal ball the rest of us would like to see, or they're just making an educated guess on that.
Yeah, I know. I personally, when you say that, I think about all the news articles that I see from some other places where, they'll say, "Oh, this is what the economist says. This is what's going to happen," and it's almost never right. So it's always best to wait and see.
Yeah, and the other thing is that we don't really have a good model on which to base this from. So sometimes you'll hear people say, well, this is like the 1918 flu. Well, perhaps in terms of an epidemiological standpoint, but the economy looks nothing like 1918. My grandmother lived in Whitestown, Indiana in 1918, and when she got the flu, the economy looks nothing like that. And so I think that that's why I'm always cautious of sort of saying we simply don't know what's going to happen.
Oh, for sure, for sure. And I wonder too, one facet of this looking for work equation, right, is the employer side as well. You know, we can have plenty of people who are looking for work and they say, I'm ready to get out there. And, you know, and in fact, I've heard this a lot. I'm sure Mary's heard this a lot, and Yesenia as well. People who say, I don't want to be unemployed. I'm not just sitting on my couch. I want to get out there. So I guess one side of that equation too is the employer side. What do we know about employers and what they're looking for right now, and the kinds of jobs they maybe have to offer?
Yeah, so first of all, there is still a job market. So employers are still looking. So this is an ongoing pattern, whether the economy up or the economy is down, is aligning workers with the jobs that are available. And so that's the challenge that we face. So I was looking recently at BLS data, looking at it in terms of education level and unemployment. So the more educated you are, the more likely you are to have survived this. The unemployment rate for those with bachelor's degrees is much lower than those with a high school diploma. So the question then becomes, have you aligned yourself with that? We do know that high-paid, low-skill workers are incredible risk during a recession. We know that manufacturing will often automate during a recession. So they will invest in machines rather than people. So then what we want to do, obviously I'm from Fort Wayne, we're a manufacturing dependent section of the state. So what I talked to our folks at Northeast Indiana Works in preparation for this, they're seeing employers actually use a lot of training dollars right now to get people ready for those jobs. And so that employer-based training function is really something. So employers are, based on the information I got from Northeast Indiana Works, is both optimistic and cautious all at the same time, much like the rest of us, because they're trying to decide if we're on the upward swing, they want to be ready, but you don't want to ramp up that third shift again if we're going to have a shutdown in October. And simply nobody knows the path of this virus and what is going to happen and I recognize that Governor Holcomb does not want to shut things down. He wants us to wear masks. And so what does that look like, and how are we able to keep the virus at bay to keep our economy open? Nobody knows the answer to that right now.
Oh, for sure. And actually, when you mentioned employer training dollars, I should also mention here, and this is something I think maybe this is what you're talking about, right? The state is putting more money than ever into training grants, both for employers and for employees who want to go back to school. Is that a little bit what you were talking about there for the employers?
Yeah, and I'm talking the employer side of training. So that workers are able to get it, and they've opened some of that up, and I'm sure Yesenia is going to be able to tell us more about that. But on the training side for employers looking to get those dollars in, get those employees, because also they recognize there is now a new labor force at the ready. So think about it. We were in the neighborhood of well under 5% for most of our counties in Northeast Indiana, and full employment essentially across the state. That has changed substantially. So when we think about it, who has the leverage now? It's going to be employers. And so they now can make some calls that they weren't able to do before. And so it's a question then of, if you are working in a $17 an hour job, are the jobs that are available to you now $17 or $18 an hour? Or are you now looking at the $10 to $12 an hour job? That's a huge difference for you and your family and your household income. And so it's an ongoing challenge with every economic cycle that we go through. It's not new. Sometimes we learn things from it, sometimes we don't. And so but there's also, like I said, still jobs available. So for those who are interested in working, and I think most people want to work, if they're available to do so. I mean, not childcare arrangements or retirees or things like that, but so that there is opportunities for them. It's just a matter of figuring out what that was and how they can redirect their skills and their talents and their interests into whatever is available where they're currently living.
Absolutely, and I think it's actually a great segue there to Yesenia. Actually, Yesenia, we talk about training workers and giving these workers new opportunities and maybe finding jobs they didn't have before. You work for Project Azul. Can you tell us a little bit about that? I actually don't even know a ton about Project Azul, so I would love to hear more.
Yeah, so Project Azul, we're a nonprofit focused on workforce development, and we're specifically focused on identifying individuals who are unemployed or underemployed. And when I say underemployed, I mean entry-level roles, and providing them with support through coaching as well as paying for them to attend training. Specifically, we're focused on the logistics and supply chain industry, which has been impacted by COVID, but it's kind of seen a shift. So it hasn't necessarily been that some places may be cutting down, but other places are expanding tremendously because of e-commerce. And, maybe folks aren't going home or aren't going out to the stores, but they're looking for other ways to get the goods that they need for their day-to-day lives. So what we do is we support individuals through the coaching, the training, and then we partner with employer partners to place individuals into jobs that are in demand. Rachel mentioned that there has been an increase in employers seeking training for workers, and we're also seeing that. We're seeing that employers who do employ low-skilled jobs, they are looking for their workers to go through some sort of skills-based training to go into more advanced jobs. And the skills-based trainings that we offer are just short-term trainings. They're next level jobs eligible, which is one of the governor's workforce development programs. So
yeah, that's great, and I think that's actually so interesting as well that you guys have it sounds like you have a very specific interest in the supply chain logistics area, because I know throughout the pandemic that has been, definitely maybe in April, right? Maybe not so much anymore now, but in April, we were all thinking about supply chain. We couldn't get toilet paper, So that's actually really interesting, and how supply chains have changed as well. You talk about the career coaching. Like, what does that actually look like? I mean, if I came into Project Azul, I don't even know if I could go in person necessarily right now, but how would I connect with you guys, and what could I expect to happen on day one?
Yeah, so a person connects with us right now. We're doing everything virtually in terms of the intake and the coaching, but a person would connect with us. They could either call us directly, or they could email us or get on our website and fill out an interest form. But they basically would connect with us and connect with our career success coach. And she basically digs into their situation to understand where they are. One of the things about Project Azul is we meet the participants where they are. We want to make sure that we understand their housing and their childcare issues, transportation. Here in Central Indiana, we're located in Indianapolis and serve the Central Indiana area. We know that transportation is a big barrier. We know that public transportation in Marion County, which is the county that Indianapolis is in, is okay, okay depending on where you need to go. But once you get into those donut counties, and the donut counties are the counties that touch Marion County, which is where a lot of the logistics and warehouses are, and where a lot of the jobs are, getting out there through public transportation is a lot more difficulty. So getting the people to the jobs is somewhat of a puzzle. So she really understands, gets to know them and understand their situation and understand, their transportation needs, their childcare needs, which, as Rachel mentioned, a lot of folks who have childcare needs, they actually haven't been coming to us because their children are at home e-learning. And if their children are at home e-learning, that means that they really can't get away during the day for a job. So while pre-pandemic, that was one of the things that we had to accommodate the most, was understanding, if a person was only available for a shift because that's when their child was at school. Post-pandemic, or we're not post-pandemic, but during this pandemic, we're not seeing a lot of folks come to us who have, limited availability with childcare, because they are not available because they have childcare needs throughout the entire day. So once she fully understands the situation and the needs of the client that comes to us, we then enroll them in a training program. All of our training programs are in partnership with Vincennes University, their logistics training and education center. They're wonderful partners. They focus on both hands-on and classroom education. So the classes are very interactive and engaging, and really don't feel like a training program because you're just actively engaged in all sorts of activities throughout the day. And then once they complete the training, we work with them to place them at one of our employer partners.
Got it. That's great. And how long do these Vincent's training programs usually? I mean, I know you said they're short term, 6 weeks or so, 6 to 18 weeks, something like that, or shorter?
So much shorter. So our trainings were designed for basically working families. So they were designed for individuals who have a lot of obstacles. And so we identified trainings that are only 2 days in length or 5 days in length that meet in-demand needs of employers. So they are skills-based training. They are 0 credit bearing, so they don't stack into a credential or an associate's degree. They are just skills-based trainings. But these trainings were identified after continued conversations with partners here in the logistics industry who were saying, you know, these are the things that employees need in order to get beyond those entry-level jobs. And some of the skills that they need can really be achieved in those 2 to 5 day trainings. And then that actually, what we've seen is that that does put them on a pathway to career advancement. So we get them beyond that entry level job into that better job, and then that better job then puts them on that pathway to career advancement.
That's great, and that's much shorter than I thought. I'm surprised. Yeah, I'm curious too. You talked about, you touched a little bit on pre-pandemic versus not post, like you said, but in pandemic, I guess. And you talked about one of the differences you saw was that you don't have people coming to you necessarily as much with childcare issues because those people are staying at home. Many of them are eligible for unemployment benefits at the moment under current laws. What other changes have you noticed from pre-pandemic to now?
So other than noticing that, childcare isn't something that we are seeing in a lot of clients anymore because they likely aren't coming to us because of those childcare needs, we're actually not seeing a huge difference. We did hit pause on our trainings for about 3.5 months from mid-March through the end of June, and then relaunched at the end of June because our trainings are in person. But since we've relaunched our trainings, we've been filling our training classes. We've seen demand from our employers. So we continue to see a steady supply on both the employees who want to get into a new industry. Some of the folks that are coming to us were laid off during the pandemic, or they're looking to change careers into something that isn't, in a fragile industry. Specifically, I think of the service and tourism industry, which here, across the country was hit hard, but here, especially the convention industry was just tremendously impacted. So we're seeing folks who are looking to shift into a new career, specifically from those industries. But those are kind of some of the trends that we're seeing.
Yeah, and I have to say I've noticed that myself, even in reporting, and the few people I've had the opportunity to talk to. A lot of them work in events. I talked to a guy who he remembered his last event was a monster truck rally, actually, in downtown Indianapolis, and that was the last event he was able to do, and COVID hit, and all the work was gone. So I'm curious, is that sort of the biggest industry that you guys see people coming from here after the pandemic, or are there others, food service, things like that as well, where people are switching from that career to another career in transportation and logistics?
So food service is one that we've also seen, but mainly it's folks that were unemployed or laid off during the pandemic coming from some sort of industry, or a lot of the folks that that come to us are also those entry-level warehouse workers that want to advance in their career.
Gotcha. That's great. And some of these employers that you partner with, again, going back to that employer side of the equation, what are the employers looking for right now? Are they looking for, obviously they're willing to train and they're willing to kind of take on new employees. But kind of what specifically are they looking for?
So one of the trainings that's most in demand from our employers is forklift operators. So folks that have that operator's license. Again, that is a skilled trade. So that's something that we're able to, provide that short-term training to support in that. CDL driving, it's not something that we support, but it's also something that we're seeing as high demand as goods need to move from place to place. Machine operators are always a steady demand, although again, it shifts from company to company in terms of the types of machines. We are seeing, some trainings in automation technology. That's something that we are not yet in again, but that's something that Vincennes offers, and they have, just full classes for that automation technology as well.
Sure. Yeah. And I know I feel like I saw a report recently as well talking about that automation and how more factories are using Internet of Things to help with their logistics, right? They want to be able to have a machine that can say, oh, yeah, we need 10 more, steel beams or whatever, and the machine can recognize that and order it, and then the employees don't have to do that. So that's great. So I'm just also curious, how long has Project Azul been around? I'm kind of curious, how long you guys been around, and what your plans for the future are here as things change. As Rachel said, we don't know how they're going to change necessarily, but what are the big plans for the future?
So we are a very young nonprofit. We actually formed as a 501c3 in November of 2019, but really took off in January of 2020, so right before the pandemic. The program model, though, was piloted in 2019 out of the Morales group as a tool to help improve the skills of their workforce to get them into better jobs. So they saw early success where they saw individuals who were trained. They were placing individuals at about a 67% placement rate, which for a workforce development program is very high. Individuals were getting almost a 30% increase in their wages, so they were seeing about a $4 per hour increase in wages. So they just saw great success in that 2019 pilot, and then started the process to make it an official 501c3 nonprofit organization. And I joined the team in January, and we really took off running pre-pandemic, and then adjusted, of course, and had to be agile and flexible when the pandemic hit. But we were able to do some direct service for some basic needs during that time. We were able to provide some informational sessions during that time, and we were really able to dig in with community partners and employer partners to understand, where are the populations that need training, and what are the unique needs of employers during this time, and how can we continue to shift our training so that we're meeting both of those needs.
Yeah, absolutely. And you talk about where do you find these people who need training? I'm not that it's necessarily hard to find, perhaps, but where do you go looking for? Like where are some if you were a coal miner, what would you say, a seam, right? A seam of coal there? Where are these places?
So we have three main sources of referrals from where individuals connect with us. One is individuals who previously went through one of our trainings refer a lot of friends and colleagues. That's a great source of referrals for us. We get a lot of individuals through just former participants of the program because they've seen that increase in their quality of life and in their professional opportunities. We also get referrals from community-based organizations. So we partner strategically with community-based organizations that serve populations of all sorts. Immigrants and refugees are a large focus of our population. We also will serve underemployed individuals. So the neighborhood community centers where individuals go for like rental assistance or utility assistance or any type of monetary assistance, we partner with those organizations as well. We partner with Foster Success, which is an organization for foster youth aging out of the foster care system. Opportunity Youth, which is the term used for individuals who are between the ages of 18 and 24 and are unengaged in the workforce or in school. And so just a number of different community organizations. And then also employers will refer individuals to us. So employers will identify individuals who are in entry-level positions who they want to promote, but that need additional training in order to get that promotion. So those are our three sources of referrals.
That's a lot. You guys have your hands full, it sounds like. And again, what a heck of a time to kind of come of age, right? As a employment nonprofit here, a skills training nonprofit. a great time, I guess, but at the same time, a crazy time for that kind of stuff.
Yeah, it's been a crazy time, and I think we were blessed that the industry that we were already focused on wasn't tremendously impacted in terms of the jobs that are available. So I think I count my blessings very often for not being having to shift in all ways.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, thank you so much, everyone. We have a couple audience questions that I've been kind of getting here on the background, and I figured maybe we could try to tackle some of these. So one here from Mike, he says, what checks and balances are in place to keep claims investigators from just disqualifying an application and basically kicking the can down the road to the appeals department? So it's a very kind of technical DWD question. I wonder if, Mary, I don't want to put you on the spot per se, but I know you've done a lot of detective work on these things. Any thoughts here?
The only system that I know that they have in place is the appeals, where you can appeal if you have been disqualified. However, that is not working for a lot of people, because even if the claims investigator was wrong and you have to appeal it, then you could end up waiting more months until they make a decision. So I believe what Mike's trying to ask is if there is anything before the appeals. I don't know of anything. I think there should be, but I don't. That's all I know is the appeals.
Yeah, sure. And I would probably say the same from my experience looking into these really technical issues as well. I mean, I'm sure DWD, I don't want to speak for them, but I'm sure they probably wish they had more claims investigators. I'm sure every workforce department does, because that would make things a lot easier for everyone right now. I would hesitate to say, and Mary, your sense of this would be good as well, maybe, but I don't believe, and I haven't heard of any claims investigators who I think are just kind of kicking it down the road. It doesn't seem likely it's happening, maybe, but it definitely could happen. And the appeals process is there. It's a legal process. It's literally a legal court process, that you can use to protect yourself and get in front of a judge.
Right.
Yeah.
I do think that there is a lot of, because a lot of these laws are so new, especially with the PUA program and everything. I do think that there is some mistakes being made because it is so new, and that's a lot of training to have to get into somebody that quick for, a job that they've already done for years, and now all the rules have changed. So I do think that's part of the problem there. So,
yeah. And we're talking about job training, and of course, how do you train for a job when the laws of your job keep changing?
Yeah.
So, yeah. Another one actually from Mike here as well. Once an application has been disqualified, is the only person who can overturn the ruling the appeals judge, or can a claims investigator or supervisor do that? Another good question I'm not entirely sure the answer of.
I'm not entirely sure of the answer to that either. I have seen a few people that said they could get a hold of a supervisor and they were able to get it fixed. But I think when it's been completely disqualified on grounds of documentation or things like that, it has to go through the appeals. So, but once again, I'm not completely sure.
Sure, yeah, and I wonder off the top of my head as well. I wonder, because the appeals process is a legal proceeding, I would think too that somebody outside of the legal sort of chain of command, I would think it'd be hard for someone maybe to step in and do that. So it may take, either a judge or some sort of lawyer from the state, someone with legal authority to do that.
That's what I think.
Yeah. Okay. Great. All right. Those are the two audience questions that I think we have. So, I mean, I know we're kind of wrapping up on time here, and I kind of wonder if I can just maybe give each of you sort of a chance to talk about, I try not to get into the crystal ball territory too much, as Rachel and I talked about, but just kind of give you guys each a chance to sort of talk about what you're looking for in the future. And not necessarily what you predict will happen in the future, but what we should be watching maybe, and what we should be anticipating. Rachel, maybe we can start with you.
Sure. I think what we're going to be watching is to see the path that the virus takes, because that's been dictating the economic conditions. So if the virus abates, and not just in Indiana, but across the country, then we can continue to see the economy recover. If we have a resurgence, not just in the state of Indiana, but across the country and frankly, the world, then we can find ourselves back in where we were at in, say, April and May. And we simply don't know what's going to happen. We don't understand this virus enough to fully recognize that. I remember when I came home, I'm sitting here in my dining room, my now new home office, and we were sent home for 2 weeks, and I thought I'll be home for a month. I'm coming up on close to 5 months here, or 6 months. And so I think so many of us thought that this was going to resolve come May. I mean, when we saw what the governor had said with our shutdown order, he's like, and July 4th, we'll all get back together and we're still on 4.5 when maybe we should really be on like maybe a 3, but that's another conversation. But we have not fully reopened the economy. So if you think about it of sort of like the accelerator pedal, we've got a governor behind us. Not the governor Holcomb, but the governor on an accelerator pedal that's holding us back out of necessity for public health. So we have tandem challenges. We've got a public health crisis and we've got an economic challenge. And the two keep intersecting. And depending on which team you're on, if you're on team public health, you look at it very differently than team economics. But you can't remove one from the other, because the moment you do that, the other one collapses and then they both fall apart. I mean, so I just think about it for when we were sitting there back, I mean, it's like, again, I'm sitting in my dining room in April, sort of thinking, what is happening? I mean, you just sort of felt the economy falling out from underneath us. Pleasantly, things have picked up so that but we don't know what's going to happen when the weather turns, because I mean, I know that I've been able to go out to eat in a way for outside that I'm not going to do when the weather turns. I'm not eating inside a restaurant for the foreseeable future. I'm sure others have different opinions and they're welcome to do that. So we don't know if October, November will start to look more like March and April by consumer patterns on that.
Sure. And I have to ask too, as well, as a researcher, you get to sort of, in some ways, have a bird's eye view in some ways, right, of what's going on. I mean, historically, like, what does this mean for you as a researcher to think, like, what an interesting time in history, right, that you get to watch this unfold?
Right. And there's, in many ways, we're not going to be able to see any of the long-term, or not even the long-term, but the effects of this for another year plus. Because the data for 2020 won't come out until May, June, or even into November 2021. So in terms of like per capita personal income, we won't know the effects of this, of how this has affected people's paychecks for another year plus. So we're just kind of hanging out waiting.
Well, I think waiting is definitely the key word there. I love it. Yesenia, how about you? I mean, looking towards the future here, what are you anticipating and hoping for or watching?
Yeah, I think Rachel really hit on a lot of things that are kind of in my head. I'm cautiously optimistic. I think, this is definitely a new time, uncharted time for everyone in terms of trying to figure out what's next. I don't know that anybody is doing any long-term planning, at least right now, because we really don't know what's going to happen even tomorrow with the pandemic and with the public health crisis that we're in. But I am cautiously optimistic. We are seeing with our employer partners that they are ramping up. They're ramping up for fourth quarter. They're still ramping up for fourth quarter despite the public health crisis. So that's promising. However, we'll have to continue to be cautious, and we'll have to continue to practice these public health safety practices that we've implemented and make sure that we're all doing our part to stop the spread.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. And Mary, last but not least, I know you're probably in a slightly different role. You're sort of like a volunteer firefighter here, putting out daily fires. But what are you watching and what are you waiting for?
What am I waiting for? I'm concerned with the mental health of people right now, and that's really my biggest concern. It's not just that they get the money, but there's a lot that goes into not getting paid and not having a job that makes you feel like you have value, and that's what our main concern is right now, is to keep people, educated and to know what they can do so they can move forward. And I also think we're going to see a new way of work in the near future. I think that this will change everything, not just for right now, but I think now that we all see that we can do this from home, or we can do this like this, I think that we're going to see a new way of working. So yeah,
Yeah, and pragmatically, I'll say too, I know one thing I'm watching, and I'm sure you are as well, Mary, is also just what is Congress going to do? Are we going to get a more permanent, $600 or whatever it is, boost unemployment benefits? So I'm sure you're watching that as well.
Oh yeah, yes, I watch them all the time. Yes, yeah.
Absolutely. Well, waiting and watching, that's kind of where we're all at right now. But we are kind of here at the end of the hour. And so I just wanted to thank each of you, Yesenia, Rachel, Mary, thank you so much for joining us tonight. And for all of you out there watching and listening, thank you so much for joining us. Keep checking back to your local NPR station for updates from me and the rest of the IPBS team on this and other topics, and stay in touch. You can do that by using the Indiana 2022 way. You'll get a text every week asking what information you're looking for, and we'll get to work answering those questions. That's, by the way, literally how this Facebook Live happened. It was from your questions, and we said, man, we've got a lot of questions, so let's answer them. So we really are trying to answer your questions. So join by texting that two-way. You text the word elections, ELECTIONS, to 73224. So again, just text 73224. And once again, thank you so much to our guests, and have a great evening, everybody.